Hi, my name's Leigh Burrows. I'm from Flinders University in South Australia, and Tim thought it would be a good idea for me to have a chat today with you about some of my work in safeguarding mindfulness for vulnerable people. Could be students, clients, patients even. This work has been something that's really been a focus for me for the last 2 or 3 years. I had previously done some mindfulness research with teachers where they practiced a short soles of the feet mindfulness meditation and did some reflective journaling, and we had some really positive outcomes from that research. So in terms of reducing teachers' stress, increasing self-awareness, empathy for others, that sort of thing. And so it was a real surprise to me when I conducted a new study. I interviewed college students aged under 25 from somewhat vulnerable backgrounds about their experience of mindfulness meditation. I just simply asked them, what happens when you close your eyes for a mindfulness meditation? And this is a question that's rarely asked because most studies of mindfulness are quantitative, and they tend to go to outcomes before they actually start with experience, as in my phenomenological work. I've since also asked other students, such as paramedic students in my own university, students in my own mindfulness master's courses, and of students in a high school mindfulness program where they were using a fairly popular mindfulness app. And the findings are really sort of suggesting that there's going to be a number of people for whom mindfulness meditation is not necessarily suitable. The students that I first interviewed really had a whole range of quite unusual experiences, from feeling overwhelmed with their emotions, dissociating, leaving their bodies, becoming robotic, losing their spontaneity, feeling as if their whole body was freaking out, being overly aware of noises and sounds, having their heart racing, their self-talk, negative self-talk intensifying, all sorts of things like this. And I've had feedback from the editor of the journal called Mindfulness that these findings contradict the findings of hundreds of randomised trials. I wasn't quite sure how to take that, but I guess I kept plodding along and continuing to do more research. And more recently, this year, I've written a book called Safeguarding Mindfulness, an inclusive and holistic approach for schools and higher education. And in that book, I include some quite wide-ranging evidence from multidimensional sources, so from research and theory, from practitioners, teachers, clinicians, students, patients, and clients, about their experiences of mindfulness meditation. And there really is quite a lot out there to suggest it can be problematic for some people. I've had to dig fairly hard, and I've gone into quite a lot of websites. That's how I came across Tim and Annette's wonderful work. Within clinicians' books on teaching mindfulness to people with suicidal ideation, for example, or teaching mindfulness to people with dementia or older adults, or to people with depression or anxiety. In these kinds of very much based in the wisdom of experience, there's quite a lot of information about treading carefully. Also, people writing from a trauma background. But these findings do not seem to have been reflected in the literature on mainstream approaches to mindfulness in schools and community settings. As you would know, quite a number of people are excluded from participating in mindfulness courses in the community if they're it's contraindicated for a number of conditions, so some of those studies haven't included those people. Similarly, in schools, research in schools has screened. There's been a screening process, so some of the young people who are most vulnerable have not appeared in the studies, so they're not reflected in the findings. In my view, it's very tricky to exclude anybody in a school setting. I come from a background of special education and inclusion, and there's practical reasons, but there's also ethical and moral reasons why we would not necessarily want to exclude. So I have an interest in safeguarding mindfulness so that we can create activities that are really inclusive and attuned to individual vulnerabilities. But of course, this requires us to be open, to seek feedback as we go along about how our own teaching's going. I've got an example of that actually with a recent student who wrote to me to say that one of the meditations we had done in class, which was tuning into the body while listening to a dome drum, that it had actually triggered some quite negative reactions in her. She said she'd noticed a heavy feeling in her stomach and she felt very disturbed and unsettled. But she told me she wanted to practice this meditation so that she could work through her negative reactions. Since she'd told me in her first journal that she'd had a trauma background of sexual abuse, I advised her that she'd probably learnt enough from her experience so far with this meditation that it would be best not to pursue it any further. And I suggested a soles of her feet meditation, a more grounding and emotionally neutral meditation for her. She later wrote of her realisation that the first meditation highlighted the disconnect with my body. It bothered me that this meditation bothered me. I began to associate anxiety with all parts of the meditation. This suggested to me that, as with most things in life, meditation is not one size fits all. If I was to run one meditation frequently in my class, my students could develop some incredibly negative responses. And that's that's from a primary teacher herself.